Hey there, it's Tanker, and this here is the LG G3. Yes, it's the LG flagship for 2014, and it is an awesome phone. So, I know it's taken me a while to give you this review. I've had the phone for about a month now, so that's a pretty extensive time spent with it. And what I have to say is that it is really great. So, where do we start? It looks a lot like last year's G2, but there's a number of significant changes. The most obvious, the first one, the biggest change is the display. It's a 5.5-inch display. This makes it a really big phone, but the bezel is kept super small again with buttons in the back. But it's not just a large display, it's also a super high-res display. It's what they call the Quad HD, 1440 pixels by 2560 pixels. Yes, that's a whopping 538 dpi. It's really just quite insane. And, you know, it seems like overkill at first sight, but actually works. And what is really good about it is font rendering, especially small text, is better, easier to read. And photos are rendered really gorgeously. So, you know, I didn't think I'd see a difference beyond 400 something DPI, but now that I know and I've used this phone for a while, I really see it. So that's the biggest difference. The rest of it is an evolution of the G2 from last year. So let me just walk you through some of the features. Inside, there is a Snapdragon 801. That's kind of not the latest, but one of the better quad-core processors. It's got 3 gigabytes of RAM on this particular device with 32 gigs of storage. This is a Korean unit. Let me just pick it up and walk you through so you can have a look. First of all, check out this display. It is really beautiful. Now, some people have criticized that, you know, the contrast ratio, color rendition, and granted brightness are not up to the same quality level as, say, the HTC M8, and I'll compare this in a second so you can have a look. But really, you know, in the great scheme of things, this is such a fantastic display, and the resolution is really great, that I'm just being nitpicky here. It could go brighter. That is one drawback compared to, say, the G2. It's not quite as bright. But anyway, so here we are quickly walking you through. You have a front-facing camera. It's a 2 megapixel. Earpiece, a bunch of sensors. There's also a notification LED in this upper area. And then at the bottom here you can see the keys are obviously software keys. You've got back, home, and notice this is no longer a menu key by default. It's now a task list or app list button, which is great. And then, of course, flipping it over, it looks very much like last year's G2. You can see the same kind of arrangement with the camera and a button pod below the camera that contains the up and down volume buttons, as well as the power lock key in the middle. The big news in the back here is the camera. Now you're going to say, spec-wise, it's very similar to last year's. Yes, 13 megapixel f/2.4. It does have a few improvements over the G2. It still has optical image stabilization, but it's been improved with one additional axis. It has a dual LED flash where it can adjust the white balance basically when it takes the picture. And this little sensor looking thing is used to assist autofocus. It shines an infrared laser beam at the target and estimates focus. It's extremely accurate and very fast, and it complements the built-in autofocus, traditional autofocus. What's great about this is it gives you the ability to autofocus at night on dark subjects without having any kind of focus accuracy issue. On the bottom here you have the speaker. It's a pretty loud speaker, but it's only mono, and the LG logo. And this back here looks like metal, but it's actually not. It's a plastic cover, but it's very well done. It feels almost like aluminum. It's a very good texture, much better than anything Samsung's ever given us. Let me walk you through the edges so you have a feel for what else is going on. At the top here, you're not seeing too much. There's the infrared port for the TV remote and a secondary microphone. Since this is a Korean model, you also have the little pull-out antenna for the TV reception, but it's obviously not working in North America since this is very much a Korea-only feature. On the bottom here, you have a micro USB connector with a secondary microphone and the 3.5mm headphone jack. There's absolutely nothing on the edges. The only thing you'll notice is on the other edge here is the battery cutout. So you can pop your nail in here and take the battery cover off. So here you go. You see the battery, you see the SIM card slot, and right above it is the micro SD card slot. And some contacts here for probably a Qi wireless charging cover that I don't have at this point. There's also, I believe, NFC included in the cover. You can see some contacts there. So not all these contacts are used for Qi wireless. Let me talk to you about some other cool, interesting bits. Now, the UI is pretty much standard LG. You can see here the app tray. It has been streamlined to look a little bit more like stock Android, which in a way is great. LG has added this functionality very similar to Google Now that notifies you, to take your umbrella because it's going to rain in the evening. It's not that useful, but if you're not invested in Google services, obviously this could be very helpful. What else is there to talk about on the software? The camera is interesting. So as much as I love the hardware on the camera, the software on the camera is a bit of a letdown. As you can see, if I go into settings here, that's it for settings. There's no way to set white balance, no way to set exposure, no way to do any kind of manual control. You can turn on HDR, and here's the other thing that is kind of a pain, is if you tap to focus, you don't even get exposure lock on that focus tap. So getting proper exposure from this camera is very difficult. In low light, it tends to overexpose like a lot of OIS-based cameras by default. Usually you can compensate that with manual controls. Removing that from last year's G2 is being really a significant pain. There's a bunch of modes, obviously. You can see here, auto, magic focus, which is similar to what's on the G Pro 2 and very similar to what the Nokia phones do with the refocus app. There's panorama and a dual camera mode, but as you can see, this is very bare bones, and it is easy to use. It is very fast, but it is a bit of a pain and a bit of a disappointment in my opinion. So, I'm looking forward to a better camera app. There are ways to apparently put the G Pro 2 APK on this device and to replace the camera app or complement the built-in camera app. Right now I'm using the built-in app, which obviously is the best performance in terms of speed and autofocus accuracy. I'm also using the Android camera app right here, and this awesome other app, Pro Capture, which gives you manual controls. But I shouldn't really have to do that, so that's a bit of a gripe for me. Everything else about this phone, though, is fantastic. Battery is 3,000 milliamp hours. It lasts a really long time despite this large screen and all these pixels it's got to push. I can easily get a day out of it, sometimes a day and a half. It's really possibly the best phone this year. I think that if the camera software was better, like if the camera had manual controls like the M8, this would be for me the best phone of the year. Of course, maybe there'll be a Nexus edition of this phone, and so hopefully that'll be the phone for me. I mean, I have a Nexus 5 right now, which is made by LG. I can only hope. I mean, honestly, I can live with even a 1080p version of this phone, but the laser autofocus is not a gimmick, and it's really amazing. And that with a proper camera interface with manual controls would go a long, long way. What else do I want to tell you about this phone? Well, obviously we want to do comparisons with other phones, right? So here's last year's G2. This is a European model without LTE for the US. A side note, I'm using AT&T, an AT&T SIM on this Korean phone, and I'm getting LTE on AT&T here in San Francisco, but no LTE on T-Mobile. I've tried. You can kind of see the display quality difference here. I've tried to get the brightness to be almost the same, but it's clear that last year's 5.2-inch 1080p HD panel on the G2 was better in terms of contrast and color rendering. Still, like, you're gaining resolution, but it's amazing to me that the G3 isn't really that much bigger than the G2, despite having a screen that's, 0.3 inches bigger. And that's a testament to small bezels. Of course, removable battery cover is an improvement. Micro SD card support is an improvement. What else is it? The laser autofocus, if I flip them over. Very similar button layout, the improved flash. Now, let's compare thickness really quickly. And this is what it looks like. Obviously, there's not going to be much of a difference, but the G3 is slightly smaller and thinner. Slightly. Not much, though. Then, if I bring up the next phone that is relevant here, it's the Nexus 5. Again, you can see kind of the screen difference. Even if I crank the brightness a little bit more here, like say to 100%, This is, just so you know, auto brightness, but auto brightness on LG phones is this weird thing where you can still set a baseline. So auto brightness on my Nexus 5, and you can see again the contrasting color rendering difference. But this is where you also see that this is starting to be a big phone. The G3 is a big phone, and next to the Nexus 5, you know, it's a little bit harder to put in a pocket and hold. So let's flip them over real quick. Nexus 5 versus LG G3. And of course, if I put them on top of each other, we can see the thickness difference. And again, maybe it's an illusion because of this kind of silvery rim on the G3, but it looks a little thinner than the Nexus 5, but not by much. So here is the M8. As you can see, almost as tall as the HTC One M8. And it's amazing to me how tall the HTC One M8 is. Again, that bar with the HTC logo takes up, you know, useless space. Now, to give you a refresher, this is a 5-inch screen versus a 5.5, and the HTC One is still a taller phone. It's not as wide, clearly, as you can see here. It's only the width really that matters, despite the pretty significant screen size. So here again, color rendition and contrast. You can really tell when you put them side by side. However, you know, in real life, when you're just holding the G3 by itself, you don't really notice that the screen isn't quite as good as the competition. But again, more pixels, more pixel density if this matters to you. Flipping them over, and you can see here the difference between a real aluminum unibody finish and a fake plastic aluminum looking finish. And honestly, they don't look much different in terms of width here from the back, which is interesting because the bezel in the front really makes it look that way. So again, the dual color flash on the M8 and the dual camera setup. Why they removed the OIS from the M8 this year is really my biggest gripe with the M8, but everything else about it I really love. So lining them up to compare the thickness, this is what it looks like. Pretty similar. It's hard to tell really. And so the final comparison is a phone that I haven't reviewed yet, but I will be reviewing soon. Here's the Galaxy S5. Again, the height is very similar. Now this is a 5.1-inch Super AMOLED display, 1080p HD. Again, all these phones are 1080p HD except the G3 with its Quad HD resolution. If I bring up the app tray, you can see the difference. Again, you know, I don't have an issue with the kind of more muted contrast and color tones than the G3 because you get that resolution. But, you know, the Super AMOLED on the S5 is really one of the best displays today. So, you know, take it or leave it. You know how I feel about Samsung phones. I just cannot handle the quality of materials in the build. You know, this is what they look like from the back. You can see the heart rate monitor here, camera, and this very chintzy rubbery plastic finish. It's better than the shiny stuff that Samsung used to do, but I'm still not a fan. Also, another thing is, of course, the GS5 is water resistant. The G3 is not water resistant, so that might factor into your purchase. But if you compare the build quality of these two, despite them both being plastic phones and both having removable battery covers, it's really night and day. You know, it's clear to me that Samsung has a way to go to match the build quality of LG's phones, and definitely a lot of ways to go to match the quality of the M8. So there you go, thickness comparisons. Again, most phones today are really not going to be thick, and this is kind of a useless comparison. But there you have it, this phenomenal phone from LG. It's super fast, it's super snappy, it's gorgeous, you know, it's super responsive, everything screams and flies, as you'd expect with a Snapdragon 801 and 3 GB of RAM on this model. Please subscribe to my video channel, like this video, check out my blog. I'm Tankgirl, or tankgirl.com, TNKGRL.com. My handle on Twitter is Tankgirl, TNKGRL again. Catch you next time with more reviews. Cheers!